All right, party people, here we are. I'm going to go out and practice tonight because I need to practice. And at the age of 54, the opportunities to practice, you got to take every opportunity you can because sometimes, the body just isn't feeling the way it should feel. And, right now I feel like it's like, all right, the knees don't hurt, my back is good, I feel fairly strong. So I need to go practice. So what I put together just real quick, what I'm really focused on right now is trying to keep my hand behind the ball, throughout the entirety, from my push away, to when the ball drops into your backswing, to when the ball raises up into your backswing, and then of course, from the top of your backswing, down into the slot, where you're, into your release zone. So right now, I do a couple of things where, my push away looks okay, and then as the ball drops into, if you want to call that perpendicular to the foul or to the approach, um, my hand kind of rotates a little bit, where the thumb kind of rotates kind of closer to my body, and I would prefer to have it. I prefer to have my fingers behind the ball to stay behind the ball, kind of like where they originated from my push away. And so what I'm going to try and do is feel the ball, like in the palm of my hand, and kind of, hopefully if I can maintain that feel, I can keep the ball in the kind of the center of my forearm, as opposed to, like when you kind of close down on it, I got a couple of uh, videos, and I'll show you. I mean, I did like I paused the videos at certain points so you guys can see, what I'm talking about. So, anyways, my primary focus for this practice session is to stay behind it. I think that if I can feel it, and if I can stay behind it and really practice that, and I know it's going to feel like trash. It's going to feel it's going to feel bad, because and I'll do a complete, I'll do a beginning to end of my approach. And I this particular practice session, which was, I don't know, a few days ago, I actually thought that I was staying behind the ball, but it's amazing what happens when you videotape yourself and you think you feel something, and that's not really what happened. So I'm gonna I'm gonna show you the video, and um, I actually believed I was staying behind it, and well, kind of like instant replay, that's not what happened. So for myself, that this is what I'm going to focus on for this particular practice session. It's only going to be maybe 3 games, maybe 4. Kind of, I haven't called the center to kind of see what the status is, but if I get a couple of games in, that'll be great. But the biggest thing is for me to have that feel of actually staying behind it and what that feels like. So, many times when you try and change a bad habit, it doesn't feel very good for a while, for a few games, maybe kind of get to that 5-10 games range of where it just doesn't feel natural, doesn't feel normal, doesn't feel very good. And then kind of once you kind of get above, depending on whatever you're working on, for me, it's going to probably take greater than 10 games, for me to break this habit. It could be a 20 or 30 game, for me to break the habit. But I'm just going to keep working at it, because I know that, in order for me to be more consistent, at my release, I know that I need to, stay behind the ball, from push away, to, as the ball goes, it goes into my backswing. And then of course at the top of the backswing, and then as the ball is getting into the slot, I really need to stay behind it. So, all right, let me bring this up here. I'm going to show you guys some videos of what I'm thinking, or I'm going to show you some screenshots right now, so you guys can see what I'm thinking about here. So, um, yeah, let me see here. Let me bring this in. That's not what I wanted to do. Okay, come over here. All right. This thing, it's not what I wanted. Over here, there. Okay, so I'm going to bring this up here so you guys can see what I'm talking about. So right now you can kind of see this is my push away. So I do like a little bit of a, yeah, I don't think this is showing up. Oh, that's not what I wanted. All right, I'm going to go back here. I'm going to go back. So right here, you can see, my push away. I've got like a little bit of a, my first step is like a little bit of a slide step. It's kind of a check. So it's almost like I'm still a 5 step. If you want to call it a 4 plus a 4.5 or whatever, but it's more of a 5 step. So here you can see my hand is pretty much behind the ball at her dress and at my push away. And here you can kind of see the ball's getting into my push away a little bit. You know, my first step is a little bit slow, a little bit deliberate, and I'm kind of doing two things. At that point, um, you know, kind of like it's like I'm checking my slide step a little bit, just because I hate to stick and I hate to slide out, but it's a little bit of a check. So I kind of developed my first step as like a little bit of a push slide, just to kind of like a sanity check, if you will, on my slide when I get to my slide. So here you guys can see, now I completed my first step, and I'm just about to start my fourth, my or second step. And you can see the position of my hand. I'm firmly behind the ball right here, which is what I want to maintain throughout all of it. And you can see I'm behind the ball. And then we get over here, this one's a little blurry, but you can see already as the ball's going up into my backswing, you can already see the position of the ball. It's already on the inside, so basically between my body and my arm, that's where the ball is. And I want to try and get it to where the ball is kind of firmly behind my forearm, if you will. So that's kind of going to be my focus. I'll see what I can do about the camera position, see if I can have it actually kind of like, maybe I'll position the camera kind of like towards whatever, wherever I'm targeting. Because to me, that's what's important, is to have your arm swing in alignment with your target. Obviously it's going to shift a little bit, because you know, as you create power, you do have a couple of steps off to the left, and that's to clear your arm swing and to kind of get your body away from your arm swing. And then as your arm swing gets up to the top, and then everything starts to come together, where the arm swing and your slide, your drive step, come together. So here, I think I want to clean this up. That's what I'm going to work on. I'm not going to say if it's successful or not, but maybe I can make it a little bit better. And then let me show you, where I'm at as far as my release point. And you guys can see here, I don't know if I can make this bigger. Yeah, that's not going to be bigger. Okay. Anyways, so here you can kind of see the ball, which is, this is a pretty good position to be in, right here, as far as, everything kind of being in alignment, the inside of your instep, with the ball in your head, it's a good position to be in. That's kind of like where you're going to get your maximum leverage at. But for this particular practice session, I'm going to try and keep my hand a little bit behind, behind the ball. don't know if you guys can see my cursor now, but anyways, so I'm going to try and keep my hand a little bit, further behind the ball. I just think that's going to add to repeatability, because that's what the game is. It's just all about, giving yourself opportunities to repeat. So that's going to be my primary focus for when I go practice, pretty soon here. There's a couple of other minor things, that I'm going to put in my head, but I'm not really going to focus my practice session on, and one of them is, go back here, this, you see here, I'll bring this up again. I mean, this position's not a terrible as far as my spine angle. I just feel like I want my shoulders a little bit further back. One of these days, maybe within the next few days, I'll try and take a side video, of my approach, and kind of see what, just see how far forward, because I'm pretty sure my shoulders are ahead of my knees. And ideally, you want your shoulders and your knees you want your shoulders over your knees, and a lot of that just has to do with, freeing up your arm swing, having good leverage. And, most importantly, when you get to the foul line, I mean, you can kind of see here, this position, like I said, this position is pretty decent, pretty good position to be in. I think that I'm going to try, just for myself, is to have my shoulders maybe a touch further back. I mean, not a lot, but just, I just feel that for me, that when I get too far forward, I start to, it's not necessarily missing in, but it's kind of like I don't get the ball projected to the right. Like I don't cross the front the way I want to cross the front. So, for me, in with my footwork and my arm swing, crossing the front for me is actually one of the more difficult things. Even though I prefer, for my game, I guess my A game is probably going to be anywhere from about 16 to about 23. For me, that's where my A game lies. And I just feel that if my shoulders were a touch further back, I could actually be more consistent at crossing that front. As far as, when you start moving to right, there's the little things that you can do to help you become, a little bit more successful. If you want to, for myself, if I move right, if I'm playing outside of, say outside of 7 or 8, for me, that kind of bleeds into more of my B game, where I don't see it that often. So I don't do it that often. I don't practice it that often. So it just kind of turns it, if I have to be anything outside of 7 or 8, it's going to be more difficult for me to be as repeatable as I am when I'm playing, between like 16 and 23. So anyways, I wanted to share that with you guys, but let me, I did kind of watch this video, where I was, this just came up on Instagram. So I'm going to pull this up and see, they had some, they had some of the pros and how they were behind the ball. It's really good shots of how they were behind the ball. I'm not saying I'm trying to mimic this, but, I kind of want to give you guys a little bit of the concept of what I'm trying to think. So, there's a couple of bowlers here, again, I'm not trying to, do what they're doing. I just kind of want to have that mindset, in my head when I go out for this practice session. So you can see Mitch, Mitch Hooper, he's pretty far behind the ball, but he was kind of like twisted up right before his release, and then the ball got, he was behind it, and then you could see his, his really strong release. So there's Brandon Bonta, same thing, he's behind the ball. There's Ryan. Let's So you can see some of these releases, I mean, this is what I'm trying to incorporate into my mindset, as far as, it's like, hey, I got to get cleaner, and, my release got to be more repeatable. So we'll see. I think maybe I'm going to try and stream it. Let me see. Yeah, my battery's okay. I'll try and stream it. But of course, I'm going to try and videotape it. I'm not too sure what I'll do at this point, but it's kind of funny. YouTube didn't allow me to stream, live stream, because I haven't made 50 shorts just yet. So uh, I got to get my short game up, as far as making shorts on this channel. But all right, guys. Well, I'm going to end this right now and keep striking.